Hi there, I'm Jennifer Main, and thank you for joining me live if you are here live. For those of you who will be watching this on catch up, the recording, please feel free to get in touch with any questions. But today, basically, what we're going to be doing is taking some time to look at boundaries. And I've spent the last year or so really delving into boundaries and the workings of them and how to apply them and how to make them part of your daily life in a way that's comfortable. Because I think a lot of people, their main issue with boundaries is that they feel like they're not allowed to, they feel mean. So there's all these emotions and all these feelings and all these beliefs that come up when we start talking about boundaries. So it's kind of a complex topic. There's a lot to it. But that's what makes it so interesting. And actually, when you start to implement them and apply them, that's what makes them so powerful. So I'm going to be doing a session today. I'm going to do another one on tomorrow and another on Wednesday, where we're kind of breaking down the three kind of phases, essentially, of boundaries and how you are able to implement them in a really healthy and harmonious way in your life. So as we're going through this, please feel free to, ask some questions, if anything comes up. The focus for today is really looking at saying no. So we'll go on to saying yes and some other things in the next session. So we're really going to look at what it is to create a boundary, what they look like, what they feel like, and kind of that first step and being able to identify what is a no in your life and being able to apply that without feeling guilty or selfish or mean, which is what so many people say they feel. So if questions come up throughout, I'll do my best to work them in. So yeah, please feel free to share or to make any comments or anything along the way. And I will do my best to make this as interactive as possible. um, so essentially the reason this started was I recognized that last year there was a lot going on with myself and boundaries. And I think I'm someone who has been quite good at setting boundaries in my life. But what I found was there were a few areas where I was struggling with that and I wasn't quite getting it right. And it was more subtle. It wasn't very obvious stuff, but the subtle things were starting to build and build and build and build. And I started to recognize areas where I had opportunities to set appropriate boundaries, to change the boundaries, to have some conversations. And I hadn't taken those opportunities, and they ended up becoming, it became an issue, and it was actually something that I had to deal with. So I will say I learned the hard way about what it is to be able to to be honest with myself about the boundaries I had been setting, what had been changing in my life, and actually what I needed to do um, to make it work for me in a better way, and actually to improve my own relationships by being able to address that. So by starting to look into this and delve into this and understanding boundaries and how people apply them, how they affect their lives. I've really started to work with a lot of people who are wanting that. Actually, this year it's been amazing the number of people that have come to me, clients and students, where the main issue is around boundaries. Where they're not having the conversations they want to have in their life. They're not being treated the way they wanted to be treated in their lives. They're not treating themselves the way that they want to be treated in their lives. And so by being able to address these things and being really honest and finding really practical, simple ways to implement new boundaries and have these conversations in their lives, it's totally changed their relationships. And it's a powerful thing to be able to apply something in a very practical way. And I think a lot of times, with any change, people have some fear. So fear triggers, change can trigger fear for a lot of people. But it's recognizing that you can do small things that can have a big impact. And once you start to kind of have a plan and finding practical, real ways to apply it, it becomes much, much easier for you. And actually, the clearer your boundaries are, the clearer you are on what your boundaries are, and the clearer you are in implementing them, the simpler your life becomes and the more graceful your relationships are. And I don't know about you, but anything that's going to simplify life, there's some times where that's all you need is just some simplification, some clarification. So being able to implement that is something that can be very powerful and very profound, and it helps people within their relationships and in their jobs and things in the physical world, but also kind of energetically and emotionally as well. So over the next few sessions, we'll definitely talk about the different ways that you can be creating that can help you on a lot of different levels. So what I'll do is I'll talk to you guys a little bit about essentially the definition of a boundary, so we can just get some clarity on that. And then we'll delve into, kind of the nuances and the subtleties of really fine-tuning and figuring out what it is that you do want in your life and how to achieve that. So first thing I want to say is that there's a big difference between a boundary and a barrier. And I think there's a lot of confusion with people about those things. And I'm sure that, you could probably recognize times in your life where you've set up barriers instead of a boundary, or other people who set barriers instead of boundaries. And very simply for me, a barrier is something that's put up out of fear. It's an attempt to try to protect yourself. It's an attempt to try to keep yourself safe. And what happens is people put up barriers to try to prevent suffering that hasn't even happened yet. So they're already getting themselves ready and thinking and worrying and doubting and having all these fears that are causing them to act and react out of something that hasn't even happened yet. And I mean, I know lots of people in my life who spend so much time worrying about what could happen. And of course it never does. Most of our biggest fears, don't come true. So we're working so hard to prevent something that's not even going to happen anyway. So for a lot of people, they're putting up barriers to pain and suffering. And I will say, oftentimes that happens because they've had something in the past happen to them. They've been hurt somehow, there's been something that has happened. So they are referencing something from their past that they have experienced that has been painful. But again, it's recognizing that the past isn't necessarily going to repeat itself, and recognizing that each experience is a new one, and that you're not having to try to prevent something that's happened in the past from happening again in the future. So barriers are really an overcompensation, and they're an extreme reaction. And they're very stuck, and they're very hard, and they're very immovable. And so when people are setting barriers in their life, what they're doing is they're stopping themselves from living. They're stopping themselves from having new experiences, from having new relationships, from trying new things. They're cutting off their curiosity. They're cutting off, opportunities for something new. And it's amazing because so many people go on and on about how they want their lives to change, but then they don't do anything that allows that change. And if people are so stuck in, well, I want my life to be different, but I'm only going to do this and this and this and this, and I'm only okay with these things in my life, then you're creating a barrier to your own growth and to your own, whatever it is that you're wanting to create. So for me, a barrier is something that is hard and fixed. A boundary, on the other hand, is something that has more flow and flexibility to it. And the reality is that your boundaries with people is going to be different for every person. So there needs to be some fluidity. There needs to be some flow within that. And I'm sure you recognize that as you develop relationships with people, your boundaries are going to change because you trust them more, or you don't. And so boundaries are okay to adjust because you may find that as the relationship grows that it's appropriate for those boundaries to adjust. So boundaries are more fluid, they're less absolute. And actually what they are is they're a real exercise in discernment, and about being able to trust other people and discerning when and how to trust other people. Because for a lot of people that have had their trust damaged or have been hurt in the past, they'll have trust issues that may keep them from having real discernment on whether they can trust another person or not. And I'm sure you all know people who just don't trust anybody because they have been hurt so many times or have been hurt in such painful ways that they just don't want to go through that again. So again, they're putting up a barrier because they feel like they can't trust. But being able to set healthy boundaries means that you can really discern people's intentions. You can discern who they are. You can discern what's going on a deeper level. So we'll definitely talk a bit more about that over the next few sessions as well. But for me, it's really about being able to gauge the truth of any situation. And the better you are about letting go of your fears and really tuning into the truth, the better your boundaries are going to be, the clearer your boundaries are going to be, the more appropriate and balanced that they're going to be. So for me, when I think of a boundary, for me, ultimately, boundaries are about choices. It's ultimately about choosing your own experience. It's about choosing the experience that you want to have through saying a yes or a no. So again, we're going to talk more about the saying yeses tomorrow, but we're going to delve more into the no's today as kind of that first step. So we're going to look at kind of how how setting these boundaries ultimately is about making choices in your life, choosing the life that you want to have. And actually, when you get that right, and when you're connecting with truth and you have a real understanding and clarity on that, then that's when you're able to have relationships that really grow, where you're really clicking with people, you've got synchronicities, and things are working for you in the ways that you want to. And ultimately, that's always what you want in life. You want relationships in your life that align with who you really are. You want connections in your life that are going to help you to grow and develop, and having appropriate boundaries and connecting with the truth of people is an important way to really start to implement that. So what I will say as well is that, I'm going to talk a lot about choices over the next couple of sessions. So for those of you who are indecisive, then this is something that we're going to have to talk about, and you might need to work on a little bit, because so much of what people really want in life is freedom, and boundaries are a way to freedom. Boundaries are a path to freedom. But then for those of you who are really caught up in your choices and have a hard time discerning what you want and how to have it, that can become a problem, and that can get in the way. So ultimately, freedom is about the ability to make choices. And actually, what I've found so much of the time is that setting a boundary and making a decision actually is, it's kind of an act of courage. It's about facing your fears. It's about, figuring out what's going on in your life. And for those of you who really struggle with decisions and who are struggling with with choosing, then that's definitely something for you to look at. So we'll do some healing and clearing around indecision, and if there are any issues that come up for you. So through today, what I'm going to do is we're going to talk through a lot of the issues and things that get in the way of setting boundaries. And I'm actually going to do some healing and some clearing as we do this. So for those of you who haven't had any experience with me or any of the work I do, I won't do anything without your permission. All you need to do is simply receive. It's just simply allowing old programs to shift and change and to release. And we'll just do that as we go through, and you can just simply relax and receive that. So we'll do some downloads and we'll do some shifting and clearing as we go through to kind of help you with that. So what we're going to do now is start talking about what it is to say no. So as human beings are amazing at learning through comparison and through contrast. We learn really quickly through trial and error. We learn about cause and effect, and we learn through comparison, and we learn through judgment. And, in some ways this is really useful, because obviously you learn very quickly that if you put your hand on a hot stove, you're going to get burned. So being able to have those judgments, those experiences, and being able to learn through those experiences is a useful thing. It will help to keep you safe. But the problem is that obviously with judgments, you can get caught up in a lot of old programming, a lot of old things that actually aren't very, very useful to you. So we're going to talk more about discernment as opposed to judgment, and there's a very different energy between those two. So judgments, again, it feels more like a barrier. It's something that's much more fixed, that is a belief that's there. But then for discernment, that's connecting it with the truth and just having the ability to, have a higher discernment or a higher understanding of what's going on for you. So when we go through experiences in life, what we're often good at, because we learn through judgment and we learn through comparison, is that we often connect in first with what we don't want to have. Because the experiences that are painful, the experiences that are uncomfortable, the experiences that are not in alignment are often what we pay the most attention to. Which is a shame in some ways, because if we could just pay attention to what we really loved and what was joyful and exciting and happy and could just embrace that and live that, then that would be incredible. But we're not always wired to do that. So often, in terms of subconscious, our subconscious is trying to keep us alive. But if we get to a point where something is so painful or so uncomfortable, then that motivates us to make some changes in our lives. So actually, in utilizing that, it makes it easier to say no. So I know that a lot of you will know, and you may actually yourself have issues with saying no. You may know people who cannot say no. I'm sure you all know people who are totally worn out, who are totally broken down, who are letting everybody kind of walk all over them, that aren't making any choices in their life. They're just responding to other people. But so for some people, it's not easy. And so for those of you who are really struggling with that, we're going to talk through that so that you guys can feel a little bit better about that. But by saying no, actually no is kind of the quickest fix, because it will give you some immediate relief if the relief of the no is greater than the fear of saying no. So we're definitely going to do some things around clearing fear of saying no. And again, that's not a no that totally cuts you off. That's a barrier. So again, it's finding that harmony. So I want you just to take a moment and kind of tune into your body, and I want you to think about saying no to somebody. Or if you're by yourself and you want to, you can even say it out loud. Just say no a couple times. No, 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 no. And some of you may actually have images of certain people that you're possibly wanting to say no to, or that you're feeling like you can't say no to. So you may already have specific ideas coming up around some issues that are going on in your life. But when you think about saying no, I want you to pay attention to how it makes you feel. When you think about telling somebody no, and you really want to say no, what are the fears that come up? What are the emotions that come up? You can share anything in the comments box if you want to, or you can just sit with this yourself and just see what comes up for you. But when you think about saying no, what are the emotions that come up? What are the barriers that get in the way? So for a lot of people, there are issues around guilt. Guilt seems to be the number one thing around saying no. A lot of people really struggle with saying no because they feel like they have to say yes. People feel like, oh, well, if I can help somebody else, then I have to help them. I have to do whatever I can to help them. Now, the work I do, the work I've done in the past has all been about service. And there's a big difference between service and servitude. Oh, thank you, Emma. Emma's saying that when she thinks about saying no, she feels like she's closing off opportunities. Thank you. We're going to come to that. So, but for those of you who feel guilty about saying no, a lot of people are also saying no and sacrificing themselves in that process. So they feel like they have to help other people, but they put their own happiness, their own well-being, their own health, their own sense of well-being and balance. They will sacrifice that for others. And what I would say is that with a boundary, there doesn't have to be a sacrifice either way. And actually, by saying no, you're helping another person. So we'll come to that in just a minute as well. So a lot of people also have real issues, and actually this is what I think it boils down to, is this real fear of being rejected. Because for the people who have been the carers in their family, who are the fixers, who are the ones that are known, by their friends as the ones who will sort them out, who will fix everything, who can take care of it, for them to say, no, I'm not going to do that, that's a big thing, because then it means they lose their place in their family or lose their place in their relationship or within their friends. So for them to say no, it means that they're going to lose part of their identity. And we hold on to identity fiercely a lot of times. We have a lot invested in our identities. And so when you start to change the way you respond to people, when you start to change those relationships, then a lot of people are afraid on some level because they feel like they're going to lose part of themselves or lose part of who they are, or they're not going to be loved, they're not going to be appreciated, they're not going to be accepted, or that they're just going to be rejected because they no longer are doing that service, so they're no longer participating or engaging in the way that they were. So, and I'm sure you hear all the time, saying no is selfish. A lot of people have a lot of fear or shame around saying no. They feel like it's mean. And I'm sure you guys all know a lot of people as well who are kind of the people pleasers. Who, that's kind of it's their identity, it's their role, that they want to make everyone else happy and that they want to just get everything sorted for everyone else. Well, again, it's lovely to want to make people happy, but if it's at the expense of your own well-being, then that's where I would say that there's a lack of harmony. And again, a lot of people just don't want to be judged. They feel like they're going to be judged if they say no. And so they're trying, so again, it's that avoidance of, I'm going to avoid this issue, I'm going to avoid judgment, I'm going to avoid people thinking mean things about me or saying things about me. It's kind of that, it's just easier to do it instead of say no. But the reality is that if that's always how you're living your life, if that's always how you're going about things, then it's not easier. If your life becomes all about other people and doing everything that they need or that they want, then what it actually does is it detracts from you and from your life and from your purpose and from the things that you really want to do. So learning to say no when it's appropriate is a really healthy balance to have. So, Emma, what you're speaking about with missing opportunities, I love that. And actually, what I would say with that is, again, that for me comes back to discernment, about really tuning in and recognizing, is this opportunity something that I really want to say yes to? Because if the motivation is I'm trying to avoid regretting missing something, then again, that's tapping into fear and having a fear-based emotion influence your decision or influence your experience, instead of choosing the things that, oh my gosh, I'm so excited and I can't wait to do this. And I know, again, life is trial and error. We've talked about this. So sometimes there are things you just need to try and then you figure out if it is right for you. But I think for me, if it comes to if it's that thing of, oh, I'm afraid I'm going to miss an opportunity, then that's where I would start to question the judgment and start to tap into that heart center and really feeling into, actually, if I do this, is it going to feel good? Is it going to feel amazing? Or is this something that I can let go of so that actually another opportunity can come forward? Because life is about opportunities. There's going to be endless opportunities for you. You're not going to miss the boat. You're not going to, you're not going to, you don't just have 5 and that's it. I mean, life, every day there are opportunities, there are chances for that. And actually I think being able to say no is a huge thing for people to learn. And I hear this a lot with people who are starting to become very successful with their businesses and things like that, is that for them, some of the biggest lessons were in saying no, because when you start to say no to the things that either you used to do but don't really align anymore, aren't quite right for you anymore, or the things that you just aren't right, then you create space and spaciousness for something new. And actually for me, that really is what the no's boil down to, is that when you start to say no's, you create a spaciousness within you so that you do have new opportunities, so that you have new opportunities for new relationships, new jobs, new experiences in your life. So actually saying no provides space and time for new yeses. So which is kind of the next stuff we're going to talk about tomorrow. But I know in terms of no's, I think a lot of people get caught up in the shoulds, coulds, and woulds, and in a sense of obligation. Obligation, again, is a really heavy, stuck energy. And obligation is a lack of freedom. And if you're doing things out of obligation, I would actually challenge you to reconsider that. Because even if it's for people that you love, friends that you love, and you're wanting to, on one level, you're really wanting to help them, if there's a sense of obligation there, that leads to resentment. And what happens is people end up resenting the people or the things in their lives that they really, truly care about. They build some resentment because they feel stuck in these obligations and feel like they have to do it. So for me, it's always about, if you're not doing it from love or excitement or joy or passion or adventure or, whatever words you want to insert in there, and you're doing it because you feel like you should do it or you ought to do it or you have to do it, then those are the things that are worth looking at in your life and kind of saying, actually, is this something I need to be doing? Is this something I need to continue with? Or is there a way I can do it differently or less frequently? Or, there's lots of ways to play with it. But the things in your life that are feeling like you should, could, would do it are some of the things that are worth considering first. So with, so if you have any questions or anything or any comments about that, please feel free to share. I'm happy to connect with you and you guys to connect with each other. So for me, there are massive benefits to saying no. And again, a lot of people want to make sure that the benefits outweigh the risks. So we'll go through this now. So with the benefits of saying no, again, it's that spaciousness. No's help you just declutter your life. They help you declutter your energy, your brain, your emotions, everything else. It just gives you some space within yourself so that you're feeling lighter, you're feeling freer, you're feeling better. And again, it's that letting go of old to create space for new. And I think a lot of times it creates an opportunity for you to either release some old relationships or allow those relationships to evolve. Because I'm sure that you guys have friends from like high school, from school growing up, from uni, from wherever. And some of you may still have the same relationships, but some of you have actually allowed them to grow and evolve. And changing your boundaries and allowing those relationships to change is what makes it magical. Because actually a lot of the people that we lose in our life is because the relationship didn't evolve for whatever reason. So being able to set new boundaries or change those with people allows those to grow and evolve with you so that the two of you can grow and evolve together. And that's huge. And actually what I think is really important is, people talk all the time about being present. Well, actually, when you start to say no and set really clear boundaries, that allows you to be present because you're not responding to the past. You're not just repeating the same patterns over and over again. You're not doing the same things just because you feel like you should, could, would. You're actually being present and saying, is this still apply to me right now? Is this still what I want to be living right now? Because so many of the people who are not saying no and who are not setting boundaries are the ones that are still repeating the same things over and over from the past. So saying no just gives you some clarity, gives you some space, and allows you to really evaluate that, this is not what I want anymore. This no longer aligns with me, and so I can let it go. I think what would be good for you to do yourself is really take a moment and think about the things in your life that you really want to say no to. And it can be really general things like feeling disrespected or feeling that people are dishonoring you or disrespecting you in whatever way that's happening. Things like being dismissed, not being heard, being undervalued or excluded, being interrupted. Those are a lot of things that people really struggle with. And a lot of times that comes down to kind of, communication and being able to, have conversations with people. But I think the first thing is really identifying, well, what is it in my life that I'm just finished with? What am I done with? Am I done with, people not listening to me? Am I done with people not honoring my decisions? Am I done with people questioning what I'm doing? Am I done with whatever? But take that time to really identify what it is that you're ready to let go of, because when you identify that, that's when you start to recognize the ways that you can make those changes in your life. So first it takes awareness. It takes a consciousness and an awareness. But once you've identified that, then you can start to implement changes in your life and make those changes. And so much of what I work on with people is a real sense of burden and an over responsibility. So I know that, we're all responsible. We are all responsible for ourselves. We have responsibilities in our life. But what I'm talking about is those of you who feel like you need to take responsibility for everybody else. For those of you who are trying to save the world. For those of you who are trying to fix everything for everybody in your family, for all of your friends, who are afraid to, or who won't even let other people, do things for themselves, who kind of think, oh, I need to sort that out for her because I know better. If that sounds familiar, you might want to release yourself of that burden. And you see it all the time. And again, I think a lot of that comes from a sense of love and compassion, or that's initially where it starts. Because, we love our family, we love our friends, we want to help others. But again, if it's getting to the point where you feel burdened by it, then that creates resentment. And it's so heavy and it's so draining and it's so difficult to live with. And so many people I come with are just exhausted. They're exhausted because they can't say no. They just feel like they have to do everything. So look at the burdens in your life. Look at what's heavy. What are you carrying that's such a struggle for you to carry? And what's cluttering your mind? What's cluttering your heart? What's cluttering your energy? What's getting in the way? So essentially, what I love about this, because again, and especially this is for those of you who really struggle with setting boundaries, and who feel, if you're feeling guilty about setting boundaries is the most compassionate thing that you can do for yourself and for others. So breathe that in for a minute. Setting healthy, harmonious boundaries is the most compassionate thing that you can do for yourself and for others. So for those of you who have friends or coworkers or family members who you feel are trying to suck you dry, who feel they would take every advantage that they could possibly take, who you really struggle with because you just feel like you can't handle being around them because it's too much. They may not understand boundaries because they may not have been taught them themselves. So if they don't understand boundaries, then they won't know how to have them in their own lives. And actually, when you kind of bow into that and allow that to happen, you're just showing them on some level that it's okay for that to continue. And sure, it's okay for that to continue if you're okay with that. But when you actually start to set some boundaries with people and say, this is okay, this is not okay, to have those conversations and start saying no when that's appropriate, then they learn what's appropriate. So you actually teach others what it is to have healthy boundaries for themselves as well. So they learn how to respect other people, and then they learn how to respect themselves too. So the more you're able to implement that in your life, the more they can do that as well. So you actually, when you are in integrity, when you are in that energy of respect and integrity, you show others how to do the same. So for those of you who feel guilty about boundaries, stop it. Allow yourself to set them, and allow your friends and family to learn from that too. It's one of the best gifts that you can give people, because when people are pushing your boundaries, they're not in alignment. They're not in that place of love and happiness. So you continuing with that dynamic is allowing them to be in that space where they're out of alignment. So when you go into alignment, they move into alignment as well. So you help them to step into that love and compassion and integrity and respect as well. So it's an amazing gift to be able to share with others. So let go of the guilt. And actually, any of you who have been feeling guilty about setting boundaries, who feel like you're not allowed, you don't have permission, who feel that it's mean or selfish, who have fear around setting boundaries. If you're ready to resolve that and let that go now, then just allow that to shift and release from your body. And let's give you the highest understanding, perspective, and definition of really healthy and harmonious boundaries. and how to implement them in your daily life and what it feels like to be able to implement them with grace. So if you're okay with that download, you can just receive that now. Oh, that feels good. And let's also give you the highest understanding and perspective of what it is to be able to say no. And that you can say no with compassion, that you can say no with grace, but that no can be recognized, it can be respected, it can be understood, and that you know what it feels like to do that with grace as well. So if you want to receive that, then please do. So, so I've been talking for nearly 40 minutes now. I'm sure I could go on for much longer. But I just wanted to check in and see if anybody had any questions or anything that they wanted to share, anything they'd like for me to clarify or go into around kind of saying no or creating a spaciousness, giving yourself permission. Andrew says, can it be difficult to create new boundaries with old relationships? The pattern is ingrained. Hey, that's a great question. Thanks, Andrew. Yes and no. I think when you become really comfortable and really clear on what you want the boundaries to be, then people will start to respond to that. And I know that recently I've changed some of the boundaries and the way I communicate with people for some very long-term relationships as well. And I will say, again, this is my own personal experience. It wasn't, I think my own fears got in the way of that for exactly what you're saying there. It was kind of, well, like it's been this way for this many years. So what happens if I all of a sudden say, no, not interested in that anymore? How are they going to respond? But actually, because it was so important to me and because I was so grounded and clear within this is what needs to change and this is why, they actually responded really well. And it's actually improved our relationships. And I know something, and I don't know if you guys have this same thing, but I know in the past, communication was a huge barrier for me. I really struggled with communicating my feelings. And I know for me, it was always a thing of, if I get angry, I'm going to say something really mean and I'm really going to regret it and it's totally going to trash this relationship. So I would just like hold it inside and hold it inside and hold it inside and bury it down until I got to the point where I was just ready to explode. And that's not healthy because it's not fair for the other person as well, because I was sitting on my own feelings and my own thoughts and they didn't know what I was thinking. They didn't know what I wanted. So I was just sitting on it and not even giving the relationship an opportunity to change because I was refusing to communicate it. So when I became comfortable, and it was actually learning how to express myself, but without the anger overpowering me. So actually, any of you guys who are not expressing yourselves, who are not setting boundaries because you're afraid of the anger that will come through or that you'll be overpowered by any other emotion, let's resolve that now. And show you what it feels like to communicate with grace, to have discernment on the words that you use, and that you can still be compassionate and loving and caring as you set strong boundaries. So receive that if you want that. So I think it's probably not as straightforward as with a new relationship. But again, I think the clearer you are on what you want within that relationship and why you want it, and a clarity on what's actually going to feel really good, and understanding the why behind those changes, then, and it's in alignment with truth and integrity and things like that, then people are going to be able to get on board with that. And it might trigger some of their stuff. Sometimes there are a lot of people in this world that don't like hearing no. They don't like it when you don't agree with them. But actually, on a deeper level, they'll respect you for being honest and they'll respect you for speaking up. And they might need a moment to kind of have a reaction. But I think that, again, if they're still resonating with you in a sense of alignment and integrity and, honesty and all those things, if they're resonating with the best of those, then they'll be able to integrate that and move with that too. And I think that's what happens with a lot of relationships with, where people either outgrow them or, sometimes people have dramatic breakups with friends and things like that, big things like that. But I think a lot of times that's an indication that, one person is growing or developing or aligning or understanding themselves at a faster rate than maybe the other person is. So sometimes people need a little bit of space while they figure that out. But I think that, ideally it doesn't have to get to that. It doesn't have to be a drama. It doesn't have to be a fight. But again, I think that's when you have that real understanding of yourself and are able to communicate that, then that's what makes that much easier. So hopefully that answered that question. Thank you. If anybody else has any other questions or anything they want to share, please feel free. I'm happy to answer anything. Still got a little bit of time, so that's not a problem. So actually, let me talk about drama real quick. So what happens for a lot of people is that they're afraid there's going to be drama. They're afraid of conflict. They're afraid of drama. They're afraid of a fight. And so they hold it all in, or they avoid conversations, avoid these things so that they don't have to deal with that. So for people who are avoiding having conversations because you're afraid of drama or the conflict, that's the best way to put this. What you're actually doing is delaying your happiness, and you're denying yourself some freedom and some fun, and you're denying yourself relationships that are based in honesty and truth. But I will say that, if it's a fear of drama and conflict, it's because there's drama and conflict already within you. So the conflict is that you're stifling yourself, you're suppressing yourself, you're not living the way that you want to. So there's already a conflict within you. You're just afraid of it being created in your outer world as well. But when you learn how to recognize that inner conflict and what it's trying to show you, then that's when you can really delve in and understand how to deal with it. So for people who have a lot of anger issues, or for people who are really dramatic or fight a lot, have a lot of drama and stuff in their life, that's because that's what's going on within them. So if that's what's going on within you, or if that's what's going on within the person that you are wanting to change some boundaries with or change some dynamics with, then it's worth looking, kind of meditating on and thinking about, well, what are the ways that I can do this in either the least dramatic way possible, or in a way where I can speak to this person and it not feel threatening, and it not feel angry, and it not feel like there's blame involved, and it not feel like there's all these extra dynamics within it. Because you can have these conversations on really big topics, but they don't have to be that dramatic. And I would say if you're using anger to motivate you, if you're using conflict to motivate you, let's resolve that too. Because you can actually choose to be inspired by happiness, inspired by balance, inspired by joy, inspired by healthy relationships, as opposed to needing anger to motivate you to set those boundaries. Because a lot of people are using that. They get to the point where they're so angry, that's the only time they'll say no. And that's not a good time to say no. You need to be saying no or changing things or altering things before you get to that. Getting angry is like that final point where you just can't deal with it anymore. You can't even think. You can't even connect with yourself. So again, like I was saying at the beginning of this, last year I had all these interesting things happening with boundaries changing with people, and I was struggling with that because I could have it was much more subtle at that point. There were things that were very subtle, and actually I could have dealt with it then. I could have made changes then. I could have said no then. I could have had these conversations then. But because I ignored the little ones and ignored the little ones and ignored the little opportunities and ignored the little opportunities, it became a little bit of a conflict and a little bit of a drama. So I learned in a really crappy way not to ignore it. Because we get signs all the time if relationships aren't really working, if they're not really aligning. We get signs of what's not working. So if you're paying attention to those signs along the way, then you can have those conversations or can deal with things before they get to that point where you're ready to like explode. Again, that's definitely something I've had to learn over the years. But yeah, becoming more comfortable with that, with the communication, with being able to say no, with being able to talk through that. And I think most people here, and here's the big thing, is that most people are understanding, at least on some level. A lot of people aren't, as I was saying before, they're just not aware that they're pushing you. They're just not aware of the way that you feel. So it's not that people are trying to be mean or that people are out to get you or take advantage of you. These are really old, heavy belief systems that a lot of people have. They feel like the world's out to get them or that other people are out to hurt them or do them wrong. The reality is that people are just trying to live their lives, and everybody's making choices that they think are going to make them feel good or make them feel better. So it's not that people are out to get you. They're just trying to figure out what's going to make them feel better in their own lives. So that, if you can look at it from that point of view as well, that kind of takes the conflict and the drama out of it, because it means that, you're just having a conversation with another person who just needs to hear your side of it and needs to hear how it's affecting you, so that you guys can resolve that in whatever way it needs resolving. So hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, so are there any other questions? Anybody else want any more clarity on anything else? Cool. So if nothing else comes up in the next few minutes, we'll finish. But what I'll say is that I'm going to do another session tomorrow at about 1 o'clock UK time. And tomorrow we're going to be talking about how to say yes. So first you learn how to say no to create some spaciousness, and then you have the ability to say yes. One more question from Claire. What is the feeling better is getting at me? Do you mean that they'll feel better if they get back at you? Am I reading that correctly, Claire? I'm not sure. Add a little bit more to it, and hopefully I can answer it. What if them feeling better is getting at me? So does it feel like they want to see you suffer? Is that what you mean? I don't want to put words in your mouth. I don't want to answer the wrong question. Oh, well, while Claire's typing, I think she's typing. I'll just very briefly about tomorrow. Okay, say yes from Claire. So that's their stuff. And you don't have to get caught up in their stuff. Other people's beliefs and feelings and how they are living their life is their responsibility. You can't change how they feel. You can't change how they act. You can work on yourself, and you can let go of that responsibility. And actually, the clearer your boundaries are, the less you get caught up in other people's drama and their nonsense. Because you can just get to that point where you say no to that too. You're saying, no, that's not mine. And if you are getting caught up in another person's drama, you're just getting drawn into their stuff. So that, again, is just another boundary issue. So being able to say, this is me, and this is my life, and this is how I feel, and not getting caught up in their beliefs or their feelings or whatever is going on for them is just an exercise in saying, no, thank you. I'm not interested. So if there's part of you that's still getting sucked into that, then that's what you need to look at. What does that part of you feel like you need in order to let this go? Is that part of you feeling like you need to get either some attention or acknowledgement? Is that part of you feeling like you need to receive love? Ask yourself, that part of you that's still getting caught up in it, what does that part of me need? Because you can get that somewhere else, or you can actually just get that within. And I'm not one that's really, I'm not a big fan of like totally cutting people out of your lives. I don't think that necessarily works, because I think that a lot of times you attract somebody else who will do the same thing because you're still learning from it. So I think it's really, but I do think that there is a time where you can set a boundary and say to a person, well, at this point, this isn't working for me, so here's what needs to happen, or we need to have some space for a while. So it may be appropriate for you to create some space with some people if they're not treating you in the way that you want. But actually, if you can get really clear on, this is the way I expect to be treated with respect. I expect to be treated with kindness. I expect to be treated with compassion. And if that's what you're not receiving, then it's looking at, what's getting in the way of that. Do you feel like you're unworthy of those things? Do you feel like you're undeserving of those things? What is it that's keeping you from that? Cool. So I think that's totally cool, Claire, to take some time and take a break from that person. Because it may be that they just need some time and space to figure out what's going on with them. Because obviously whatever's happened has triggered a lot of stuff for both of you. So there's loads of stuff that's coming up that both of you will need to figure out, sort out. But again, it's that remembering that, you can't make somebody feel differently. You can't make somebody act differently. And if you're taking responsibility for fixing that, then that's too much. It's not possible. So what you can do is actually look at, okay, well, what emotions are coming up for me? How am I responding to this? What's uncomfortable? What's upsetting that's happening there? And go in and heal your own self within that. Because actually, that person is showing you what you need to heal with inside of you. That person's kind of that mirror for you, or is kind of helping to indicate what it is that you're ready to heal right now. So for anyone else who's kind of resonating with any of this conversation, who feels like you're having similar things going on in your life, I'm just going to send a healing now to you and asking that whatever is ready to resolve is resolved. And that you know what it feels like to set really healthy, harmonious boundaries with those people, so that you can allow those relationships to evolve and change as and when they're ready to. And what I will say is, unconditional love and healing is so powerful. So even if you're just imagining sending love to that person, they'll receive that on some level if they want to receive that. And sometimes that's what people need. That's really what they're wanting. So even if you don't understand what's happening or understand why, do the healing, do the work on yourself, so that they can act however they're going to choose to act, because they will. But actually healing yourself may change that dynamic. It has a good chance of really changing that dynamic. Because if you release and resolve the triggers within you, it resolves the conflict and the drama between you and that other person. So this is why, people talk about peace starting within. It totally does. If you resolve all your conflict and drama and pain and suffering within you, then there's nothing to trigger that with other people. So you just don't have those dramas. You don't have those conflicts with others. So it's looking at whatever areas you are experiencing that in your life. Look at what's coming up for you. Look at the patterns there, and figure out what you are learning from it, or what you need to do to resolve that. Yeah, so hopefully that's helpful. Cool. So just having to check through. Thank you guys for asking questions. Cool. So thank you guys so much for joining me. It's been fun. So I'll be back on at 1 o'clock UK time tomorrow. If you'd like to join me, please do. And we'll be looking at what it is to say yes and how to make your yeses a priority in your life. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to add to the chat feed here, and I will answer them today or tomorrow whenever they're added. And hopefully see you guys again tomorrow. Thank you so much. Have an awesome day.